Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, April 29th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, back here with you. On this episode, we got some news you should know. We got a promotion in Houston that might be of interest to a lot of folks. Got a recall of a prospect on the north side of Chicago that we'll talk about later on in the show. We got some injury follow-ups. We got hitters moving up and down. A couple of high-end hitters that people are excited about and worried about that we're going to talk about on this episode. We got a mailbag question we're going to dig into, and then we're going to take a look at where the money went this weekend, who were the big pickups, and who were the big drops. I think we're going to spend a little more time going forward discussing the players that were dropped because there can be hidden treasure that pops up on the waiver wire or guys that maybe need to come off of your own rosters. So a lot of ground to cover on this episode. How's it going for you on this Monday?
It's good. We're like right into the Little League playoffs, so we've been having a bunch of 8:15 in the morning games. Followed up by like 6:30 at night games from the older kid. So it's kind of hard to like do anything but baseball. Yesterday I just woke up, did baseball, watched baseball at home in between, and then went and did more Little League baseball. So yay! Oh, and then Sunday I woke up and threw batting practice for an hour and a half. So.
How's your arm? Good?
It's good. I did short box, so I didn't have to throw as hard. And but the kids are getting bigger, and some of the balls, my internal things shriveled. Like the ball is that I feel like I almost died one time. The ball just because I'm also like I'm throwing from like 20 feet away from them when you do short box. So
yeah,
I'd like throw it in there, and I started throwing and like instinctively just ducking behind the screen after every throw. I had this like weird throwing motion where I ended up under the screen. You gotta watch out with these kids as they're getting bigger.
Modern bat technology making the role of throwing BP to children a little scarier than it used to be. Other notes here before we get rolling. You can join our Discord. Be sure to jump in using the link in the show description. Also, smash the like button if you're enjoying this video. Let's get rolling with Joey Loperfido. He was mentioned in our position preview series much earlier than he should have been because I think he was the last player that showed up on the ADP list. And here he is in the big leagues before the end of April.
So the Mr. Irrelevant or whatever?
He was Mr. Irrelevant by ADP, but I liked him a little bit just as someone that could find a way to fit in Houston. He plays a lot of positions defensively. He's got interesting tools for fantasy purposes. There's raw power, there's speed. At previous levels before AAA, we saw low strikeout rates, low 20% range K rates, kind of 21, 22% pretty consistently. We saw an ability to draw walks, a little like for the level old at times, or at least age appropriate now that he's been in AAA. So it's not like you're talking about a guy who's crushing a level at an age way ahead of schedule, but he's doing what he should be doing to earn this opportunity. They've obviously had a lot of trouble getting production out of Jose Abreu. I think the question with Joey Loperfido is twofold. It's like, one, how much is he going to play? And then two, with the strikeout rate jumping up to 30% at AAA last year and this year, we're talking about a 57 game sample size. What is his strikeout rate going to be in the big leagues, and how much of that K rate jump, given that he was in the low 20s before, was the result of AAA and the automated balls and strike system and the unique zone there?
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, one thing that I would say is just sort of aside from the league context, a 10% swing strike rate is a surprising number to have next to a 30% strikeout rate. So, Loperfido's swing strike rate was 10.4. If you look at guys that had 10.4s to 10.9s, you've got Jeffers 18%, Real Muto 26%, Manny Machado 23, Corey Seager 17, Walker 24. You don't have any like 30s and 40s down here. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In the 10% range, the highest is 25 or 26. So you put that aside. You say, okay, according to swing strike rate, his projected strikeout rate should be around 25%. Let's say that. Then you look at the context that automated balls and strikes creates, because he had automated balls and strikes at AAA in 23 and 24. I went back and looked at the numbers as they came out. I found a bunch of stuff on Baseball America, and Jason Stark also had something on this. And what I found was that when these things were first introduced, walk rates went from 3.2 to 9 to 5.8 per 9. And strikeout rates went from 8.6 per 9 to 10 plus per 9 in the leagues where they had automated balls and strikes. And I think the way that you understand this, especially when you look at Loperfido, is you say, here's a guy that has a high walk rate. So on some level, he's not an aggressive swinger. And so what happens is he's going to let a ball go by thinking it's a ball. Sometimes that's going to be a strike because it's just called differently. And so that's could be one of the sources for his swinging strike rate going up. If you take this translation, this 8.6 to 10 plus, if you take that rise and then contextualize his strikeout rate from this year, his 30% strikeout rate in AAA for Loperfido, if you contextualize it using the rise that has happened in the past, it's basically the same as a 25% strikeout rate. Now, projection systems aren't going to necessarily know all that. And they're also going to project Loperfido to be not bad's not the right word, but like, a rookie. Like right. They regress him hard to league average. So they're saying a 30% strikeout rate. There is actually a chance that he comes up and only strikes out 25% of the time. And if that happens, you're talking about a guy with 250 type batting average, maybe. Which is closer to league average for your most fantasy leagues, and then somebody who could in a full season hit you 25 to 30 homers and steal you 5 to 10 bags. So automatically more interesting if he can strike out 25% of the time, and there's some evidence that maybe he could.
Right, and if for whatever reason, if somehow Jose Abreu comes back to, I don't know, 80% of the player he used to be, I don't think this is going to happen. But if it were to happen, Loperfido's versatile enough to move around and keep a role. I think he can actually stick on the roster. If he hits enough, he's probably going to find playing time. And I think he could just claim a spot outright if Abreu continues to struggle. But the impact of the ABS strike zone at AAA was something that we had a question about from Andrew, because sometimes we attribute a higher walk rate for minor league pitchers to that zone. Sometimes we talk about a higher K rate for hitters. And the reason why is because it's a different zone, right? Like you highlighted that very well, the big jump in Ks and walks. It just messes things up because it's different. And I think that's the point of emphasis. It doesn't have this perfectly seamless sort of effect. And I think a lot of times we talk about it, we're just wondering if that's, hey, like maybe this guy doesn't have the right combination of skills to quickly adapt and post the same kinds of numbers he did at lower levels. It might not. The things we ordinarily look at with strikeout and walk rate that would indicate skills changes might not be actual skill changes at AAA because of this.
It's hard to parse it.
Super hard.
I guess it is a little bit interesting that both strikeouts and walks went up. You kind of think there'd be an inverse relationship, but I think you've got it right. It's just the changing nature of the zone makes it everyone have to it makes it harder for everybody. There are new strikes that are called it's called strikes before. That makes it hard on the hitters. They're also more precise in places, and there are more balls called. So the pitchers are going to be focused on why are these now balls, and the hitters are going to be like, why are these not strikes? And both of them are struggling to figure it out. Like maybe things would, if you gave them 5 years, would sort of settle to where they'd been before. The weird thing is, what I like about ABS is that you can be precise, and so you can say, oh, we did this, now walks exploded, let's change it. So that's what they did. So once these walks and strikeouts exploded, they changed things. They made it more narrow, 15 inches instead of 17 inches. They changed the height. They started making it so that the height was related to actually where your shoulders are. So if you're crouching or whatever like that, they changed the zone dynamically. But what's interesting is that, like, now that I'm talking about this, is like, why maybe you should wait a couple years, because you don't know exactly if maybe it is just, it's cool. You just needed to wait a couple years, because if you keep changing the zone, maybe you're just going to keep creating more walks and strikeouts. Like, oh, I thought that was a walk. I thought that was a ball. Oh, now it's not a ball. Okay, no. Oh, I thought that was a strike. You know what I mean? So if that's the source of why walks and strikeouts both went up, then changing it over and over again in the name of precision might be like fiddling too much with the knobs.
We've also had Trevor on the show on Fridays most weeks, with Trevor May, talking about how the strike zone is lower in the minor leagues, and that wreaks havoc on some players depending on where their hole is,
where their strengths are.
Swing. Yeah,
we saw that with Gonzalo a little bit.
If you have a problem with high fastballs, even in the minors, that's probably going to get worse as you go to the big leagues, because those are going to be called strikes in some cases on top of the ones that you're not swinging and hitting. So,
and Manzardo said in his interview with us that he had to confront his more of a hole at the top of the zone in AAA because they started getting called strikes, and they hadn't been called that before. So we've heard that from a couple different sources. It also makes sense. If you think Angel Hernandez is bad, then what do you think's happening in Single A?
True. This is very true. Now, this is interesting too, because Pete Crow-Armstrong has had a similar jump in strikeout rate with his move to AAA. He's a lot younger than Loperfido, but 24% K rate or lower at AA in the levels prior, 29.7% last year at AAA when he got there, just 34 games, 28.9% this year for 19 games. Now he's up because of injuries for the Cubs. And you look at him and say, yeah, you know what? Maybe something similar is going on here, because he seems to have a decent idea of what the zone is. He doesn't walk as much as Loperfido, but he walks enough. The same kind of thing could be happening.
He does have a higher swing strike rate base, though.
Right. And I think that's probably one of the key indicators you should use to differentiate like what's likely to happen next, at least in the short term. Like long-term improvement from Pete Crow-Armstrong could still be there because he's a few years younger. But I do think the swinging strike rate is going to give you a better idea of what the possible magnitude of improvement could be against better pitching, even though you don't expect K rates to come down with the promotion to the big leagues.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at him, let's say, his swing strike rate was up this year in AAA, but let's give him like a 15 and then look for comps in the 15 range. Now you're looking at players that are more. Who are they on the first page? Yeah, they're kind of on the first page in terms of swinging strike rate. Brenton Doyle, Cal Raleigh, Giancarlo Stanton, Elly De La Cruz, Teoscar Hernandez, Adolis Garcia. Those are the comps for swing strike rate for Pete Crow-Armstrong. So I do believe he's got a swing and miss problem. And, the thing that he's got to do, the things that he has to do to counteract that, there's the Paul DeJong way through the solution, which is just be great defensively, right? That's might be part of the package for Pete Crow-Armstrong that might keep him on the field. But as we learned from Paul DeJong, that doesn't mean that you necessarily want him in fantasy. The other ways out for Pete Crow-Armstrong are just hit the snot out of the ball, like a Jose Siri or Giancarlo Stanton, some of the other guys that I've put on there. I don't think he's a hit the snot out of the ball kind of guy. So I'm a little bit pessimistic about Pete Crow-Armstrong, if I had to be honest.
Okay. I think he's got a few ways to be valuable, and because of his defense, his playing time's really safe. So that's the built-in sort of cushion for PCA in the short term. I think it's interesting. I have not looked at the swing strike rate leaderboards for hitters in a while. I'm not surprised to see Ezequiel Tovar is number one, given what we know about him before, right? I mean, he's got a 46.9% O swing. That's the Sports Info Solutions number, but they vary slightly from source to source. But Tovar's been fine from a slash line perspective. I mean, 284, 336, 422 is a little bit of a step up for him compared to what he did last year. But the approach looks
resting on a 412 BABIP. I mean,
412 BABIP, more hard contact this year. He's up to a 40% hard hit rate. So there's some small signs of growth. But the top of that list: Tovar, J.D. Davis, Michael A. Taylor, Byron Buxton, Paul DeJong, Jose Siri, Brent Rooker, Chris Taylor, Bobby Dahlbeck, Nick Castellanos. This is not a place you want to live. Generally speaking, you do not want to be high on that list. Those are all like 19% and higher.
I think, you've got Gorman and Geloff. That's where I'm a little bit more comfortable. They're at 17% and they hit the ball super hard and they have some speed or they have some defensive ability. That I do get nervous at 17%. I get nervous at 15%, but there's a lot of good players if you go from 17 to 15. Just Churrio's in there, Julio Rodriguez is in there, Michael Harris, Westberg. There's a lot of good players from 15 to 17, but yeah, Buxton, Tovar, Siri, that makes me super nervous. And Castellanos, with the fact that he's chasing outside the zone and not making contact outside the zone anymore, that makes me even more nervous.
I'm flipping the board upside down for a second. Anthony Rendon, 2.7% swinging strike rate this season.
I'm leaving the qualified filter on just so I don't have to see that.
No one should have to see that. I set the number to 50 plate appearances.
Yeah, well, if you have it on qualified, you got Quan, Lee, Arias, Pascantino. Now that's why you're intrigued by him. It's not the greatest batted ball stats, but if he could have a natural 18 home run talent, I think if you make this much contact, you put this many lottery tickets out on the field, I think you could sort of generally just maybe hit 22. You know what I mean? Like an 18 might turn into a 22 just because you're making more contact, and a couple times you mishit the ball, but it goes out. You know what I mean?
I see a name on here that is very intriguing just because of how inexperienced the player is. Wyatt Langford, 6.2%. Mason Wynn, also 6.2%. I love to see players that have very little big league experience popping on this list. But yeah, Vinny Pasquantino, we haven't talked a lot about him really since draft season. I had a lot of questions about how his shoulder would bounce back from surgery. The start to the season isn't great on paper. I mean, it's not terrible either. He's hit 4 homers. He's driving in some runs because the Royals are putting runs on the board. But this isn't quite what we were looking for. At the same time, hard hit rates back where they were before he got hurt.
Yeah.
K rates are still low. I think this is a pretty good up arrow here.
Look at that max EV. He's already hit a ball 2 miles an hour harder than he did last year.
I mean, that's a really good indicator of health being back where it needs to be. So I would say if you liked Vinny Pasquantino back when he broke in, you should probably like him now.
Yeah, I would buy low.
To get to some injury follow-ups, got a few things to pass along. Kyle Bradish will make his next start for the Orioles. Will spot back into that rotation. Still got a couple injuries there, but obviously Bradish is in so long as he's healthy. When you're looking at a guy like this coming through a rehab assignment, is there anything beyond stuff numbers, if you get them, that you think kind of matters? It serves as a good indicator that we can trust someone in their first start back off the IL. By results, Bradish looked really good last time out. 6 Ks, 1 earned run, 5 innings pitched. That was against the Braves AAA affiliate at Gwinnett. So a really nice outing. Like that, to me, is a kind of a nice little confidence boost if you're thinking about throwing him back in your lineup for the upcoming week.
Well, I'm cheating because these are all basically different ways of talking about stuff, but fastball velo and also pitch mix. If he's not throwing a pitch that as much as he did before, wouldn't you find that a little bit disconcerting?
If he's backing off the slider or something.
Yeah.
Is that what he's doing?
No, I don't know. I don't necessarily have those numbers. I think that this will be one of those ones where I think if I had him on the IL, I might be happy to just lose one good start just for the ability to like leave him on the IL and see that start without having skin in the game. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'd like to see his velo coming back. I'd like to see him throw the slider just as much. Yeah, I'd like to see how long he goes into the game.
It looks like he'll get the Yankees as part of the last game of that series at home instead of on the road. So
another good reason to leave him on your bench for that first start.
Having seen what the Yankees did in the last 2 games of that series against the Brewers, I think you could be a little cautious about throwing someone coming off the IL against them. I'm going to see if I can find some. I'm going to use my.
Oh, there's another one of my bold predictions that's going well.
What's that?
I said that they would have the best offense in the American League, or maybe the best offense. I forget what it was.
They looked good this weekend.
What are we talking about here? Runs scored. They are 6th and 2nd in the AL. There's a chance there. WRC plus, they are 4th and 2nd in the AL. So them or Baltimore.
Just occurred to me that there might be a way to get that Kyle Bradish pitch mix on the fly. You might remember that once upon a time, we learned that you can get the game ID from the MILB box score.
That's right.
And you can go to Baseball Savant and open up a different box score and then just change that little 6-digit number at the end of the URL. And let's see what we got. Yeah, we do have some numbers from Bradish. 95-2 is where he topped out in that start at AAA.
Okay.
And player breakdown. Let's go to.
We have his hitting number.
Here's what I got. I got 92. He's got minimum 90.1, max 94.6 is what it's showing in the box down below.
That's not good.
92.5 for the average.
That's not good.
He threw 15 sliders.
That's okay.
That was down. Everything looks like it's down about a tick or two for the most part.
I'm a little worried about him, man. I mean, you're saying that like the guy that didn't have a great fastball is going to come up throwing 92.5?
I can't figure this out though. So in the top of the box score, the top pitch velocities are above what's showing up in the player breakdowns. I've never seen that on Savant before.
I wouldn't be surprised to have some technical glitches on minor league numbers though.
Yeah, so I was looking more for the slider usage, 19% slider usage in that.
But even the best number that you've seen, that you've said that he topped out at 95.6, he averaged 95 before he went down.
Right. So we'll take a little more of a wait and see with Bradish if we can. Certainly good news though for the Orioles to get him back. Given the initial diagnosis, I mean, I think more people were expecting setback surgery before a possible return to the big leagues. Vaughn Grissom,
it could still be bad news.
It still could be, but
yeah. But at least he's coming back to actually pitch. At least you have one more shot at it.
Vaughn Grissom should be back soon, probably early part of this week. I think Tuesday is their first game of the week, if I remember correctly. They don't have a Monday game. Much needed return for a team that's been just ravaged by injuries. Pretty excited about Grissom. Got him stashed a few places. I think you activate him right away if you need the MI help, especially. I'm curious to see if they actually move him around a little bit.
Strikeout rate of his career in AAA too.
Yeah, right. And he spent a little time there. He really hasn't spent a ton of time at AAA, but he spent some time there last year and kept it right in line with what he did at AA. 14.1% over a long sample last season.
I think he'll have a good strikeout rate and a good batting average. I think the big question is how much power.
Right. I'd love to know how much he's going to hit the ball in the air. I think he's got the kind of hit tool where even if it's not a lot of power, he's going to fit really well in Boston. Average will be good. OBP will be solid. Lineup position is going to be good. And he's going to get to some steals too. And this is a guy that
hit a bunch of doubles off the monster and not necessarily hit homers, but have a good batting average, 10 to 15 homers, 10 to 15 steals.
Pretty efficient base stealer most places too. 13 for 15 last year at AAA, 20 for 24 at High A back in 2022. Had a 7 for 8 at AA in 22 games before his big league promotion. A lot of ways Vaughn Grissom can be good. One other pitching rehab note to pass along. Taj Bradley. Got him stashed anywhere? He's actually working at AAA now. And it was very good in his first rehab start. 7 Ks over 5 scoreless innings. I'll take that.
Yeah, I'm excited for Taj Bradley. I have him stashed in some places, and I stashed him in some places. Him and Max Meyer are kind of like, and Shane Baz, for what it's worth. Shane Baz is only pitching sort of like 2-inning stints and maybe a little bit behind Bradley. But all 3 of those are names that I'm surprised that you could still get them. I think this is the perfect time to get them in almost any league because they have that kind of top end upside. Yeah,
they're scheming it a little bit with Shane Baz right now, just trying to backload the innings probably a little further into the future. Looking at Bradley, same trick on that box score, by the way. 12 swings and misses. It was 5 no-hit innings. Of course, the numbers are going to be good. Velo numbers, he had 5 pitches over 97.8. So he had the 5 hardest thrown pitches of the game based on the actual leaderboard. And then looking at the mix here, what was Taj Bradley throwing? Four-seamer, splitter, cutter, curveball. It's about 50% on the four-seamer, 18% each on splitters and cutters, and 12% curveball usage.
I mean,
his velo numbers look good.
His best pitch is still his fastball, but it's good to know that his velo is there. So
yeah, so that stash might be bearing some fruit here in the near future. Given that he threw 5 innings, I mean, he's
seems like
more of a whenever they need him, they could bring him back in.
I guess then the question is, who's losing their job in the rotation, or are they just going to wait for injury? Because right now, that would be Tyler Alexander is the worst in the rotation. You've got Littell, Eflin, Savali, Pepio are 100% in, and they've been doing some Sean Armstrong, Tyler Alexander kind of pairings. I think they could bring him up anytime. Wouldn't you rather have Taj Bradley over, that sort of pairing?
Yeah, I think they can use Tyler Alexander the way they've used guys like Jalen Beeks for a long time. Just use him as that bulk guy, stretch him back out if you need him. But it may only be one more start in the minors before Taj Bradley gets another look with the Rays. Let's talk about a few hitters that we're actually adjusting expectations for. 3 in particular, 1 fun, 2 a little sad. Simple question for you. Elly De La Cruz, you've got a month's worth of data. He's been fantastic. I saw a Sarah Lang's tweet looking at the power speed from Elly in the first month, and he's in rare company with what he has done to begin the season. How high do you move him up? If we're doing a second chance draft today, is Elly De La Cruz a top 3 pick? Is he a top 5 guy, top 10 guy, top 20 guy? I mean, it's up from where he was, for sure. Where are you comfortable taking him as someone who was already perfectly content to draft him at price throughout the winter and spring?
I'm glad to see that the playing time projections have been adjusted, and that the projections are now more in line with what I thought. But I'm a little surprised that with the Bat X in a 12 team with an MI, he's the 21st bat right now in the auction calculator. That seems like a floor for me. I think he'd be in my top 20. Who would I take him over? That's when you actually start to have to ask tough questions. It's like, who are you? Are you taking Elly De La Cruz over Kyle Tucker? I don't know. Kyle Tucker's like the safest bat ever. Are you taking him
very safe?
Like, are you taking him? So I think I might take him over Corbin Carroll.
Yeah,
I know that's jumping ahead on the on the rundown.
I had Carroll at 5 at the first or final set of hitter rankings that
the projections have him at 12 by the Bat X.
Do they meet? Like, does Carroll fall and Elly moves up? And
12 seems like a little high, actually, because behind Corbin Carroll's Austin Riley, Freddie Freeman, Jose Ramirez, Devers. Listen, Vlad Guerrero Jr., I'm starting to be out on, where it's just like, I don't know that the top end power, I don't know if we're going to get the Vlad we had once. And I don't know if it's just recency bias. Maybe I should, stick with it. But I'm going to take Corbin and Vlad and put them behind Elly. So now Elly's in my top 20 at least. But I think Elly versus a Freddie Freeman or Elly versus a Julio Rodriguez is really hard. And I think I would just defer to having the veterans ahead of him.
Yeah, it's a tough exercise. I think top 10 is like the highest I could go with still having an up arrow there. He's laying the foundation. Elly De La Cruz is laying a foundation through 1 month. Yes, it's only 1 month to be a number 1 overall pick in 2025. That's not saying he's the number 1 pick right now for the rest of the season, but like what more do you want from a player?
Well, I think there is something to say for what more do you want. For example, Tango has been Tom Tango, who's the chief data architect for MLB AM, has been putting out bat speed numbers for Elly De La Cruz, and his bat speed is like 20% better as a left-hander.
So just stop switch hitting, man.
That's what Tango keeps saying. If Tango says stop switch hitting and you'll be even better. I think that's worth pointing out is just that like his strikeout rate against lefties is higher. His isolated slugging against lefties is 143. Of course, that's a small sample number, but like, it lines up with the bat speed numbers we have. So, that's one thing. I would also say that, he does still hit the ball on the ground a lot, 54%, and he does strike out a lot, 31%. But he's really refined his approach and making better and better decisions at the plate all the time. And I think he's just going to be, he's going to be like Stanton with speed at shortstop. And I think there's some good and bad things in that sentence I just said. You know what I mean?
I think that's a great thing for like the next 8 to 10 years. And then it maybe becomes a problem later. And I'll worry about that when we have flying cars and
Yeah. But Stanton also put the ball in the air. So, it's not a perfect comp, but right now the most pessimistic projection is for 24 homers and 54 stolen bases with a 255 average full season. So 260 average full season.
Yeah, there's still some concern about the average being a little light because the strikeout rate's still higher than you'd like it to be. And if you pull back and say, well, what has Elly been doing in those splits going back to last season? It's a problem. Like hitting from the left side is clearly better for him. You look at full career now. It's again still a limited sample. His numbers against lefties. Elly's got a 195, 264, 289 slash line. It's a 49 WRC plus with a 38.4% K rate. Against righties, 266, 345, 510, 123 WRC plus. That's within like less than a calendar year in his first exposure to big league pitching. That's really, really good.
On the flip side is if he does have some growth against lefties, then maybe you'll see that strikeout rate come down and it'll be even another level. And the last thing I'll say is, I got some pushback in TGFBI. I drafted Elly and Tatis as 2 of my first 3 hitters. And I'm in first place.
Are you first overall or are you first in your league?
I'm first in my league and I'm like 6th or 7th overall.
All right, you're single digits overall. I'm 27th overall.
Yeah, so it's going well. And I would say this, consider punting batting average in more leagues. I'm not punting batting average, but you can get lucky in batting average. And there are so many players that are available to you if you consider punting batting average. It was sort of a soft punt to batting average for me. I did spend some time. I drafted Yoshida and some other players later to try and massage my batting average some. But it's not a league that hits very well for average. And you can buy too many Arias, Yoshida, Verdugo types. You can actually, and fall behind in home runs. So consider punting batting average.
Related to all of this is the Corbin Carroll conversation. What is your level of concern, 1 to 10, with Corbin Carroll's shoulder not being right, given the power has been down kind of going back to the All-Star break of last year, right? I mean, it's been a rough start in terms of slash line, 189, 295, 236. That's horrible from any player, let alone someone you took with your first pick. The barrel rate's down from where it was a year ago. The hard hit rate's also down a lot. He's got a 23.5% hard hit rate. Swing decisions are still good. He's still a burner. I looked at Carroll throughout draft season and said, I'm not that worried about the shoulder because he played a lot in the second half last year. And I feel like if it was really bad, he wouldn't be able to play through it. Now I'm starting to say, okay, he's a completely different player if we're getting a lot less power. And I'm going to pull the actual numbers up again. It's 1 homer so far this year, and he had 7 in the second half last year. So we're looking at a stretch of 300 or so plate appearances where he's hit 8 homers and only 1 so far this year. So what's the level of concern with Corbin Carroll?
I mean, it's not a 0, but it's not a 7 through 10 either. And one thing that you mentioned, he's a burner. He's got 8 stolen bases, and I think he's going to continue playing. I think there's no risk of him being sent down. He's kind of a natural born leader, and I think that they want him to kind of work through this. The other thing that I have as evidence that the shoulder is not completely far gone is he still hit a ball 111.5. So that is down from last year, but that is above average. And if you can tell me that I might get average power from here on out, then he's almost a buy. Because if someone's selling him saying, I don't think he's going to hit 10 homers this year, I will take the over on that. And if you're showing me these projections, I'm going to take the worst projection he's got. I'm going to take the worst numbers in all the projections. So I'm cherry picking the worst numbers. 261 average, 15 homers, 31 stolen bases.
Still a good player. Still like a second rounder if it's not a first rounder.
Yeah. And let's say you want to be even more pessimistic and just be like, I think he's a guy who can only hit 15 homers over a full season, and he's only hit us 1 so far. So really, I think 13 or 14 more homers is the very top end. That's still non-zero power, as evidenced by the 111.5 max EV. So I'm a little worried. I'd say a 3 to 4.
Okay. If someone was playing Autonew with you and you had Elly and they had Carroll and they offered you Carroll for Elly straight up today, a trade you probably wouldn't have been offered a month ago, would you accept that? Or would you reject it and keep Elly?
No. I mean, I just said that Elly was ahead in our rankings too.
Okay.
But I mean, it's like, I don't know. Corbin for Vladdy, like, yeah.
Oh, I mean, that's still Corbin.
Corbin for, like, because we had like we were looking at the top 20 players. I'm trying to make it a little bit harder. Jose Ramirez because of the age, 31.
Might take Jose Ramirez over Corbin for the rest of this season. That's a good level of like how far down
but
does
in a
Corbin
keeper
go?
League. Maybe
you take Carroll.
You take Carroll and you give them Jose Ramirez and they get the benefit of this year, but then, going forward. Trey Turner versus Corbin Carroll.
That's keeper, obviously Carroll. Redraft, maybe I'd take Turner.
Yeah. All right. So we got to go move our sights down. I mean, Vladdy was a yes. Devers
has been banged up. I was worried about him because he had that collision with Tyler O'Neill, and he had a little ding before that too that was causing him some problems. But he's actually been productive these last handful of. Like, he missed about a week. He's got 3 multi-hit games in the last 5. Like if there's something physically bothering him, it's not evident in the results right now. So I think Devers is mostly healthy despite all the bumps and bruises,
and showing a little bit more plate discipline than usual.
Yeah. Great place to draw the line. I think I'm on the Devers side of that one too.
Yeah. Michael Harris. I think Harris does a lot of things that Carroll does, but he seems healthier right now and producing.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a case for Corbin Carroll to be like a top 20, a top 25 player.
Bryce Harper.
A clear, obvious. I think I'd rather have Harper than Carroll today.
I mean, in the keeper league, it's pretty obvious. I think I'd take Carroll.
Yeah. I guess Harper's got the back that was bugging him this spring, too. So it's not like you're getting a completely clean bill of health from him.
Yeah. Also, he's just, I don't know. He does have a steal, and he's 3 years of double-digit steals, but you wonder when that sort of dwindles.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a little bit of a dip for Carroll in second chance leagues and on the trade market. There's more that could actually get done with him now.
If he fell to like the 3rd round or something for me in a 15 team.
Oh, I'd be real happy with that. Because you're banking on the speed being there. The only thing you're really worried about is the shoulder getting worse to the point of it putting him on the shelf and requiring a lengthy IL stay or some kind of surgery.
Yeah.
So that's built in. But 3rd round discount seems pretty appropriate for Corbin Carroll. Last name for this cluster, Nolan Jones, who appears to be heading to the IL with a back injury, it just hasn't been the same for Nolan Jones so far this season. 35.9% K rate, so that's up. Walk rate's down a little bit. Only one homer, a couple of steals so far. Hitting the ball on the ground a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
What's going wrong for Nolan Jones? Like the IL thing kind of makes this even more problematic. But what do you make of this start to a season that I liked Nolan Jones by the end of draft season? I talked myself into it as a good idea. I thought most of what he did last year was real, even with the swing and miss concerns, probably taking his batting average from the 290s and lowering it to like the 250, 260 range, despite playing half his games in Colorado.
Yeah, it's really strange. I mean, his swing strike rate is down, but his K rate is up big. He's not letting called strike threes go by. He's not being, too passive. I would say it's probably, a lot of times I talk to a hitter in a situation like this, and they'll just be like, Joey Votto said this, Lars Newbar said it recently. It's just, I can't really talk to you about strategy right now because I'm not feeling good.
Mm.
And I guess I can kind of see that across the board because his pull rate is down so much. His high-end max EV is still there. I guess every once in a while you can feel good in terms of, connecting on one, but, not pulling the ball, not pulling the ball in the air and then striking out this much. It all kind of, then with the IL stint, I'm willing to, if I can, hold him through the IL stint because I do think there's a lot of upside there. And then I guess, in 10 and 12 team leagues, this is maybe the type of bat that you just have to move on from because there's stuff on the wire.
It's hard. I mean, a 10 teamer, I could see it maybe because the wire offers up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A 12 teamer, even where you're starting 5 outfielders, I'd be finding every way possible to hold on if it's a 3 or 4 week timetable for his return. We don't have one just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a top 50 player here in terms of opportunity and skills that he showed for most of last season.
Yeah, I agree.
Man, tough spot to be in if you drafted Nolan Jones, and certainly a tough re-rank now that we add an IL stint for this back injury to the equation. Let's take a look at where the money went over the weekend in our leagues. Did you think we'd be talking about Joe Adell as one of the most heavily added players, even down to 12-team mixed leagues like that? That is not something I thought we'd be talking about during the final week of April. But Joe Adell, if you look at the underlying numbers early on, seems to be making some changes, right? I mean, the K rate's way down. We've really only seen one stretch in his career back in 2021 at the big league level where he's kept a K rate in the low 20% range. Are you buying this? Quality of contact's way up, 51.4% hard hit rate, hitting the ball in the air more than ever. Like, those are things we generally get pretty excited about.
Yeah, it's an interesting line. The swing strike rate is the best of his career at 13.7, but that's also pretty high. And I think of 13.7, I mean, we were talking about 14 and 15 makes you 25. I mean, I guess you could have a 13.7% swing strike rate and a 24% strikeout rate. That's possible. But it's only sort of possible paradoxically if you aren't very patient. And that's what he hasn't been that. So he's trying to go get that ball. Maybe this is the best way for him to be. Just be super aggressive and try to basically float your OBP through your quality of contact. Have a great batting average on balls in play because you hit the ball so hard in all these angles. And so therefore get to a 330 OBP by having a 340 batting average on balls in play. That is part of his skill set, considering he hits the ball super hard and he's fast too. So I know the projections aren't in love with him. They've got a lot of sample of him striking out closer to 40%. And so the projections are mostly around 230 for Joe Adell, with, like 25 homer power and, 15 steals in a full season. I'm willing to think that he could maybe hit 240 and have like a 310, 320 OBP at least. So I guess I'm into him. I love I've always loved the tools. And when you talk about a guy who has tools like this and is 25 years old, sometimes it just takes, an extended chance of everyday playing time to unlock that.
I can't help but wonder, just given the power and the speed, especially, and questions about the hit tool, like, could Joe Adell be this year's Nolan Jones, the guy that didn't get the job right away, but got a delayed start, got an opportunity, consolidated some of his best skills, took a step forward with the swing and miss, and we're talking about him months from now as a risky early round pick next year. Like, that could happen. It wouldn't be the strangest thing we've ever seen in fantasy baseball if it played out that way. So
yeah,
nice
I think in 15s,
it.
you have to take the shot now where he's basically played in 6 straight games. And you have to think, okay, this is the direction the Angels are going. He's going to play every day. I think in like a 10 or 12, you can wait 3, 4, 5, like wait a couple more series even to see if the strikeout rate goes up with the playing time and see what the playing time does. Because just because we think the Angels should do something doesn't mean the Angels are going to do it.
Hey, just because we think anyone should do something doesn't mean they're going to do it.
Well, no, I think it's a lesson, because sometimes you'll be like, oh, you hear like bet on skills, not rolls, and that is the way I believe you should bet on skills, not rolls. Most of the time, but opportunity is everything. And so without the opportunity, you could just be, the 12th best hitter on the Dodgers. Like, would Josh Outman be a buy low in any other situation on any other team? Probably. On the Dodgers, I'm like, I think they're going with Pages.
See, I think if Pages is going to play center field, that's a problem.
That's a problem for Outman. Yeah, that's
a big problem for Outman.
Playing. Yeah.
So in 12s, that's what we saw. Joe Adell get added in 12s. And Pages this week in 12s, where he hadn't previously been added, was a pretty popular pickup too. And then, of course, Pete Crow-Armstrong, we talked about earlier, and Tommy Pham, who's now up with the White Sox, who actually swept the Rays this weekend and still have a miserable record for the season. Adell, Pham, PCA, Pages. If you are ranking that group of 4 outfielders for the rest of the season, who would you rather have the most out of that bunch?
I'm going to go with Pham. He's just going to strike out the least. I do think that the power and speed will be there. And he's like catnip for my risk aversion.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
You get the old guy safe projection.
Yeah, exactly.
I would never call Tommy Pham an old guy to his face, like 0% chance.
And Tommy, you're listening. You're bright and beautiful and young.
You're the youngest 36-year-old on the entire planet. You're smart. I'm dumb.
No.
But no, I understand where that's coming from, because the power was still there last year. The speed was still there. It's an average that won't hurt you. It's max volume playing time, whereas everybody else in the group has playing time risk. Everybody else could lose their job.
All 3 of Pages, Adell, and Pete Crow-Armstrong could be basically injury replacements.
Right. They could get bumped back to either AAA or just 2 bench roles. That's entirely possible.
Of the young guys, though.
Yeah. So of the next 3, is Pages. Team context is a factor. And I think they've had enough weakness in the outfield where even if Outman gets going, I kind of like Outman as sort of a deeper league stash. He's more schedule dependent, though. I wrote about him as someone that week to week, you really have to monitor the schedule. So he might be someone you drop one week and you pick him up 2 weeks later.
It could be a Hayward. Can't be a Hayward Outman platoon, really. Pages is a right-hander.
Pages hits the ball hard.
Yes,
he's patient.
And he overcame that gross, strikeout rate binge that he started on, and now he's, what was it? Someone texted me. He struck out. Oh man, what was it? Can we give me the strikeouts here?
While you're looking, I might be Pete Crow-Armstrong last of them right now, even though he's probably the best player of the entire group in the long, long run.
He struck out 9 times. He struck out 8 times in 7, 10, 14. He struck out 8 times in his first 14 plate appearances. And since then, he struck out twice.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. It's a big adjustment.
Yeah, but what I like about Pages is I think the strikeout rate's going to be the best out of the three, is how I guess. Although projections have it a little bit closer than you might expect. Pages on the upper ends, but I think Pages' strikeout rate is going to be the best of the three. His batted ball quality is going to be second best to Adell, and his speed is going to be third best.
Fair, okay,
but it's a balanced package, and strikeout rate has outsized importance because all three of these guys could hit 210, except Pages really has a higher floor. He's not going to strike out that much, I don't think.
On the pitching side, where did you see money going in your leagues? I saw a lot of Eric Fetty in 12s because he was great again over the weekend. Bailey Falter's got a 2-step. I think that's just streaming a play. I don't think there's like this increased interest in Bailey Falter. We talked about the K rate still being low, even though the results have been good. Jamison Taillon, I was surprised to see him out there in a lot of leagues, but I think he made the adjustments already last year. I've said this a zillion times. Some Slade Ciccone shares popping up. Got to get Slade's mentions in here because he's becoming our guy, given our struggle to pronounce his last name properly.
Yeah. Well, I like his stuff. I think that, it's not a great fastball. There's a lot of people that have this problem, but it's not a terrible fastball, and it's 2 to 3 good breaking balls, 2 to 3 good secondary pitches, and a 91 stuff plus fastball for a starting pitcher. It's not quite like, for example, Brandon Pfaadt has an 81 stuff plus fastball, and that's a little bit of a problem. That's why he has this issue against lefties. So if Slade has a better fastball than Brandon Pfaadt, and 2 good secondaries, maybe 3, I think he's pretty interesting actually, and I think they need him. So Slade's and what's interesting about seeing these bids is that Slade and Jameson are worth bids where you think you'll keep them for the season. And I'm just going to talk about this in $1,000 sort of bid numbers, $1,000 free agency money. I think you can spend $50 or $60 on a pitcher you think you'll start the rest of the season. I think that's worth it. I struggle when I see like $25 to $30 ones on Bailey Falter types, because I did the math, and if you spend $25 a week on your streamer, that's $600 out of your $1,000 for the season. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's too much. That's probably twice as much as you want to spend on a streaming spot for the season, because you have to think you need saves, you need hitters, you need other things, So for me, the magic number for streamers is sort of 10 to 15, 10 to 17. I want to keep it in there. Maybe 17 if I'm like, ooh, if he does have a good week, maybe we will keep him. You know what I mean? But like a Bailey Falter type, I wouldn't want to spend more than I almost like 7, 8, 9, maybe 11. And if I really want, if it's like falling behind in Ks, like that's where I want to be. So I saw, I think, some missteps when it comes to bidding too much on streamers. I try to stay out of that. And then lastly, one of the things you can do if you do want to stream is try to stream a week ahead. So I bought some Landon Knacks for $5 even. He's a 1-start pitcher this year. He's going to be coming up on 2 starts coming soon. Simeon Woods Richardson is someone you could get for very cheap right now. That's going to be a 2-start pitcher the week after this. But that starts me on a whole nother rant with 2-start pitching, which is Simeon Woods Richardson in 2 weeks is going to get Seattle and then be at Toronto, which, I know Toronto is scuffling, but that would be one that I'd be nervous about throwing him. And who was the 2-start? Oh, we have Kenta Maeda on my bench in our main. I don't think we're starting him. The Razzball says he's the number 2 pitcher this week because he's got 2 starts and he's a veteran. He's projectable. The second start is at New York, dude. Like I see a 7 spot, dude. Like I don't want any part of that smoke. Would you be starting Kenta Maeda at New York to get the 2-step?
I'm not trying to do it. If I have to because other guys are hurt, I missed out on bids, whatever, then I think that's where projections can rationalize our thinking a little bit. But the broader trend with Kenta Maeda for me, I wrote about it in our recap last week. I think he's a drop, and that was focused mostly like on like a 12-team league and a 15-team league.
The fastball is just so bad now.
He was already a hide the fastball guy, and now the fastball's worse. Like, what other adjustments can Maeda make? I think you're looking at two steps that are both at home, where the matchups aren't that bad, streaming opportunities in that home ballpark against average or worse teams. Like, those are there are use cases for him. The bigger thing that comes up, though, is like in a 15-team league, that you're in a 15 where you're thinking about sitting him. He's harder to cut in a 15-team league because the who are you going to add question is scraping another layer down below the bottom of the barrel in those.
Yeah, we're keeping him around.
Right?
Like maybe he'll have a Cleveland in Detroit, game soon.
Because like think about a league like that where Ryan Feltner, who has good stuff but has the unfortunate,
he got picked up this week.
He's a Rocky, and he's got 2 on the road this week, so people were excited about him, and he can miss bats. Like, I totally get it, but if you are chasing a guy with a 6 career ERA in a 2-start week on the
then
waiver wire,
Maeda's keepable.
Maeda becomes keepable.
Another way I did the math was that I like to have, so I usually go with a 7-2. If you were allowed to have 9 pitchers, I usually go with like a 7 starters and 2 relievers. And then I really like to load up on my bench with starters because I want to have those options every week. And so I think typically I will have 11 starting pitchers in a 15-team league. That means 165 pitchers are relevant. And I don't know if this is by accident or not, but my rankings went down to 165. And that means Bryce Elder, Steven Matz, Kyle Gibson. These are relevant in 15-teamers.
Yeah. So my takeaway is that I want even more pitching in those leagues that I'm not having to deal with this problem. Like, I want to change the balance of the roster because I feel like it's a little easier to find some useful bats that don't scare you. And it's much harder to find quality pitching right now in 15s, at least in the early part of the season.
In this league, in my main event, I think we're in second or third right now. The best starting pitcher, Bryce Elder, went for $82. That's out of 1,000. That's pretty aggressive for me. And then around him are a ton of hitters: Bo Naylor, Crow-Armstrong, Mark Canha just went, Andrew McCutchen, Mike Tauchman, Nick Senzel. Like, those seem like pretty good. The next pitchers are Bryce Wilson and Bailey Falter going for 27 each, which I thought was a bit much. Simeon Wood Richardson for 27. See, I might do that because maybe you get someone you get to play for longer, and Ben Lively. So I think the quality of bats, we ended up getting Davis Schneider and Lawrence Butler for a combined $5.
Yeah, I mean, bargain bin bats that you think might actually play enough, whereas bargain bin pitchers that have bad matchups or bad skills, you don't even feel good about using them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe my push towards pitching is going to be even more aggressive in 25. It's just in leagues where you can't trade, especially. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You want to fight for these same pitchers with everybody else? I find that I don't really like doing that. So one other thing here to talk about before we go, I was looking at the most dropped players from the RotoWire Online Championship 12-team league, which is a very competitive 12-team league format, has an overall prize pool, same as like the NFBC main event, just smaller leagues, smaller entry fee, big old prize for top spot overall. These cuts all pretty much make sense. Gavin Williams was the most dropped player. He had a setback working his way back from that elbow injury, which he suffered with like a weighted ball workout. It wasn't just like completely normal pitching injury, but I agree with that one. It's like, you just can't wait. Like, we'll see if he gets healthy and you can be excited about him later on this season. There's no reason to wait this out, given that this pause might take longer than the first one did. And
plus, there's also a little bit of wonder of what his actual true talent is as a pitcher.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Like, you'll wait a little bit longer for like a Verlander than you will for Gavin Williams because you're like a little bit more sure of what's going to come out the other end.
100%. Tristan Cassis, I totally get it. You just can't wait on players.
Did you see some of the stuff about that?
They were saying he was told by his doctors that it was like he created his own car crash with his rib injury. Yeah, cartilage tear in his left rib cage.
players rotate so fast. This is part of the injury discussion that is uncomfortable because there's no real answer for it, which is we are asking so much out of the modern athlete. We're asking them to do things to really push it as far as they can, and that's true in any sport, more Achilles tears in NBA, more, there's more, we're asking them to be bigger, faster, stronger, to the point where it was like a car crash inside him just because he's rotating so hard.
Yeah, he's going to be out until late June, and they already put him on the 60-day IL, so I think that's why you saw him get dropped. Charlie Blackmon, 12-teamer, not a guy that gets rostered all the time. That was probably for the schedule, being in Mexico City, getting those games at elevation. Jonathan Clase, we talked about him when the Mariners promoted him. He was a heavily dropped player. It's because he is going back to AAA, so it makes sense to drop him. Henry Davis, I think this is sort of a preemptive one with Yasmani Grandal getting close to returning and Davis's struggles that we talked about a couple weeks ago continuing. Plus, Joey Bart is there. Joey Bart's playing well. So that confidence boosting
he could
reset,
go back down.
Yeah. I mean, Henry Davis has only spent 14 games at AAA. He destroyed it when he was there.
Yeah.
But a few more weeks at AAA to sort of get right mechanically, that could be in order. And you can't play him right now in most leagues. You have to wait for him to turn it around anyway. Jordan Walker was a big cut. JP Crawford injured, right? I mean, JP Crawford's a good enough player to stay on the roster, but he has an oblique injury. So,
and this Walker cut is in 12 teamers.
12 teamers, yeah.
15,
I think is a little tougher because, I mean, who are you going to replace him with there? I don't know, man. I would probably held him.
Underlying stuff there. That's okay too.
I like enough about Walker's underlying numbers where if I have a healthy enough roster, otherwise I would have tried to hold him. That's my general approach. Crawford because he's hurt. Abner Uribe. I noticed something with Abner Uribe watching him again this weekend. I've seen it a couple of times. There's something he's struggling with the engagement. You have to engage the hitter by a certain time, and he's getting warned for that. It seems like every time I watch him right now,
he's just a slow pace guy.
Yeah, a little bit slow, but just like he's not adjusting to that very quickly. And I wonder if that's just like a blip for him, but obviously the usage hasn't been there as far as
also
closing
has
games.
Really, really bad command.
Yeah. So he was cutting a lot of 12s. I completely get it. I traded him in a keeper league. I could trade him for Tyler Black.
Seemed pretty squarely ahead of him.
Yeah. I just think someday Abner Uribe might be a fantastic closer. That doesn't seem like it's happening next week or next month on a regular basis based on what we see right now. A couple of more at the bottom. Colt Keith off to a really rough start so far. Has that long-term contract extension that he signed with the Tigers, but also it's not impossible that he'd get sent down. 67 games last year at AAA, kind of comes back to confidence. The thing that's interesting, he's not striking out that much. An 18% K rate, 8.4% walk rate. And we saw something similar. Didn't Spencer Torkelson have that run at the beginning of his career where the plate skills, the swing decisions all look good and the results were bad? Some of it's the ballpark. You can't blame it all on the ballpark.
I also think that maybe some ballparks just have like different seasonal splits that are pretty aggressive. It could be. It wouldn't be surprising me if Detroit is like one of the coldest parks in April and one of the hottest parts later on, right? Like Cleveland, we know, for example, plays like a pitcher's park for a month and then is actually kind of a hitter's park, like surprisingly. Right. So I would hang on to Colt Keith even in redrafts. There's a lot to go there. I mean, if we're talking 10s, you just got to keep moving. 12, I'd like to hold as long as I could. I think this could turn around pretty easily. Like a lot of the plate stats are good.
Yeah, I think with Colt Keith and a 12, it's a little more of a luxury stash even than like a Jordan Walker. And I think that was reflected in the difference in what they cost on your roster in the first place.
When you say luxury stash, I've got I've been winning. I'm winning, and I'm first in TGFBI, I'm first in BARF, and second in main. We have luxury stashes. So if you're first in your league, you can hold on to Colt Keith on your roster a lot more likely than if you're last in your league.
You're probably last healthy.
League, you just gotta catch something. You gotta keep moving. Yeah, and you're probably healthy. Yeah.
That's probably a big part of it if you're at or near the top of your league right now. Jose Soriano got dropped in a few leagues. He's got good stuff. We talked about some of the concerns as someone who's had multiple Tommy Johns.
And he's pitching really close to the top end of his velo. But I would give him another shot.
That looked like a pretty reactionary drop for a lot of folks. Had a rough start against the Twins over the weekend.
But he
earned
gets
over 1 2/3.
at Cleveland next. We just talked about how that is a decent park for pitchers, and then at Pittsburgh after that. So like the schedule looks pretty good. Versus St. Louis, are you scared of that?
No, not at the moment.
I think at Texas May 19th is the next start I'm scared of. So that's 3 straight starts that I would start Jose Soriano. So I'd pick him up if he got dropped.
Probably going to end up on someone else's roster. Then Jackson Holiday. I made the list 11 deep just to include Jackson Holiday. So it's the 11 most dropped players from the online championship.
He got dropped in my main event.
So he got dropped in some 15s as well.
So I think that is a luxury stash of if you are in these leagues where he's dropped and you're in the top 3, find a place for Jackson Holiday. If he's dropped in 15 teamers, that makes him pretty interesting. We also saw, who else do we see that we got dropped? That's interesting. Kevin Biggio, JP Crawford got dropped. So there's some interesting names that get dropped, and if you watch the drop wire, you can sort of find some gems. But I think the hardest thing for me anyway is, I think the easiest thing is the way that I first go through all of my teams and identify droppers is who's hurt.
Who's hurt, right? Are they going to miss more than a couple weeks?
And how good is their talent versus their like Wade Miley's hurt. Oh, okay. Well, I had him just in case there was a good 2-step I wanted,
Yeah, man. So, unfortunately for Wade Miley too, it's Tommy John surgery, I think. So that could be.
It's really sad.
Could be the end of the line.
Saddest picture of him. He looks like a sad. Who's the actor that he looks like? The Wonder Woman actor, the guy.
I'm looking at his face right now.
It's like the kind of French guy, or the Canadian guy, the Wonder Woman bad guy.
No help there. Sorry.
Oh, come on.
Not my wheelhouse.
I have to ask the internet.
Wade Miley's going to be a pitching coach someday, I think. Hope that works out.
Yeah, I could buy that. People were saying that he's Pedro Pascal, dude.
Oh, how did I not come up with that?
Yeah. How did I not? It took too long. Anyway, so the first thing is who's injured. And then the second thing is, like, how desperate am I? Like, did I have a 2-starter? These are the easy ones. And you're like, did I have a 2-starter that I'm not that into? Then like, okay, keep it moving. And then the last is, how bad is my team? Let me start looking at the luxury stashes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can I, if my team is bad and I've had Cole Keith on my bench for a while, but I need to do something there, or my team is hurt, and I need an active bat. And then the hardest one is a healthy guy who's playing that you liked for some reason that you need to move on from. So the hardest cuts for me in these 15 teams were JJ Bleday and Gavin Sheets. Now, how do I make that decision after a while? Some of it is, well, Lawrence Butler is doing a lot of the things that JJ Bleday is not, and they're on the same team, and they're both playing all the time. And Butler has speed, and Butler has more top-end exit velos. So if I like Bleday at all, then I probably like Butler a little better. So that's an easy one. Sheets was one where Max Meyer, I think it was Max Meyer was on the thing, and I thought I can make more out of no, Max Meyer was for Wade Miley. What did I do Sheets? Because Sheets is not striking out a lot. I picked up Jesus Sanchez over Sheets.
Oh, that's kind of bold, because Sheets is doing a lot of things we like.
He's not striking out. He's got some bad ball oomph. The schedule, Jesus Sanchez gets 4 games Monday through Thursday. And I think none of them are lefties.
So you just saw an excess of playing time for at least part of 1 week, and you're kind of saying this spot on the roster is fungible, so I might as well.
Sheets is almost like a streamer for me. He's not a luxury stash. I'm not going to stash him if I'm not playing him. You know?
Okay.
And so you kind of, I think one thing that I do mentally is kind of sort guys, as you can hear, Yeah. And so I sorted Gavin Sheets into hitting, streaming, or fungible spot I'm going to play with. Hitting, streaming. Yeah. So he's a hitting streamer for me. If I like the schedule for him, one of my tools that I use is the Razzball Streaminator. It's just a good way to like at least get a sense of, am I going to sort these guys in different buckets? Is he a top 150 bat this week? Is he a top 200? Is he a 300 this week? If he's a 300 this week, and I've got something out there that's a top 150, I got to make this move.
Yeah, the Gavin Sheets projections are solid, but they're definitely not must keep. They're a little better than a lot of waiver wire guys, but they're not.
And I would say that, like, he also, like, his batted ball velos are only okay. Like, for a slugger to have an 8% barrel rate and a 107 max EV is kind of boring, right?
It'd be nice if he stole some bases.
He's kind of boring, and it's a bad team. So how many runs and RBI is he going to get? So that's part of my thought process. The last one that is the most difficult is maybe in the more shallow leagues where, like, I think that if you run a projection for the rest of the season, and what I noticed was, for example, Christian Encarnacion-Strand right now is rated the 18th best first baseman in 12 teamers with CIs going forward, right? That's really borderline. That's surprisingly borderline. And if you are looking at Loperfido and it seems like ridiculous to make that jump, remember, it's not as ridiculous if the projection, the sober projection that's better than what he's doing right now, is for the worst CI in your league, right? Do you want to hold on to the chance of having the worst CI in the league, or maybe take a chance at having better than the worst? So if you run your projections, that's why I use the auction calculator regularly during the season. It's like a sanity check. It's like what would this guy do the rest of the season? What is the baseline? What are the projections saying? And if they're saying, that's pretty boring what you've got, maybe picking up Loperfido for CES is not crazy.
It feels like it is to me.
It feels crazy. It does.
I liked CES a lot. We got actual proof of concept last year in terms of the power. It was like 30 home run power almost in the time that he was in the big leagues. That was after a bit of a slow start. Maybe some questions about plate skills. I mean, there's been some runs during his career where he hasn't walked a lot. So if he continues to strike out a lot, the real world value dips a little bit. He ends up in the bottom half of the lineup at least. That hurts him a little bit. I thought the thing that made Christian Encarnacion-Strand a good target throughout draft season was that it felt like he was getting dinged in playing time because of the crowd more than he actually would. So far, he's played a ton, just hasn't cashed in yet. I still see him as a little more of a guy I want than a guy that I'm cutting, but your broader point is a good point. You want to be looking at the bottom end of startable players and saying, how close is this projection? And then we talked earlier in the show about how with Loperfido, the projection systems might be pulling something in that's a little bit wonky because of ABS, and you have to sort of correct for that. If it's close, you can at least justify it.
And one thing I have noticed from people asking me questions and the difference between sort of players and analysts, and I have had this thrown at me as a failing of most fantasy baseball analysts, that we are fence sitters and we tend to take too long to make a decision. That's because we tend towards projections and tend towards what happens most of the time. And so that means like holding on to players. What I have noticed is that I think that people that listen to us and people that play baseball are more aggressive than we are, for better or for worse. And so I'm trying to find a way to kind of help you along to a place where you can be more aggressive, but you're also keeping, if it's not the Encarnacion-Strand land, then let me tell you, Brandon Drury is the 20th best. Jamer Candelario is 21st. Josh Bell is 22nd. Andrew Vaughn is 23rd. Anthony Rizzo is 24th. They're all droppable.
Yeah, I think everybody out of that group, the only one that I would think twice about maybe is Rizzo.
Yeah.
Because of the concussion and how that kind of complicates everything. But yeah, generally that CES feels like the line. Like I'd say CES is in, I'd keep him. Everybody else below that, I think I would take the shot on Loperfido over pretty much that whole group.
Yeah, I mean, Rizzo's hitting 277 with the powers back and things look pretty good, but he's definitely not going to steal any bases. He's going to take the seat some weeks. He doesn't have great barrel rates. It's kind of a volume play, and the projections don't really appreciate it that much.
Yeah, and Andrew Vaughn, frustrated in a deep league where I've got Andrew Vaughn and no one better to play or pick up in his place. So once Loperfido has first base eligibility in that particular league, I actually think Loperfido might take Vaughn's spot on that roster.
I don't know. I'm not suggesting he doesn't listen, but I think that Vaughn, like a new voice, like a new hitting coach or something. Like if he's working with somebody on the side and not listening to his own hitting coach or not, you know what I mean? Like try a new approach, dude. Like, why don't you go up there and just try to pull everything into the bleachers? Can we try that?
All of the previous versions of Andrew Vaughn in the big leagues were better than this. More hard contact, lower strikeout rate. Like I hope.
And his pull percentage just keeps going down and down and down. And so does his hard hit and barrel rates. And it's like, come on.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty simple connect the dots situation that it could be correctable. It's like, how long do I want to wait with it in my lineup in a deep league, though, for that light to come on?
Do you know what the difference is between the slugging percentage on a pull fly ball and an opposite field fly ball?
Oh, it's like 400 points, isn't it?
Oh, it's even more. I think
it's even more than that.
It was 700 plus slugging.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I know we've talked. It's a lot. It's a big difference.
Yeah.
Well, there's also like knowing that and being able to execute it too.
Right,
like,
right.
You may be fully aware of the problem and just like
that's what we've seen with Torkelson is some like trying to figure out that contact point.
Right. Some of that could be going on with Andrew Vaughn as well. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. We go live at 1 o'clock Eastern on Fridays. Give us a nice rating and review wherever you listen to this podcast. You can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. You can find the pod at Rates and Barrels. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.